This is your one and only 𝐈𝐸𝐸81 with your daily dose of video goodness, and welcome back to another informational Valheim video. Today we're going to talk about how you can easily calculate the DPS of any weapon in Valheim. Let's get to it. Alright, so in the video I put out yesterday talking about knives and weapon DPS, I had just so many comments, just a ridiculous amount of comments saying that I was wrong, that I was not calculating the DPS, I was calculating damage per hit. That's on me. Apparently, I did an absolute crap job at explaining what was going on, how I did what I did. So today, I'm going to go into a super detailed breakdown of how to calculate DPS using the in-game DPS tool. So, to activate the tool, you need to have the ability to run console commands, admin mode, all of that good stuff. I have a video on it. I'll link it down in the description. Most people know how to do it. It's pretty much common knowledge now. Once you do that and you're in admin mode, all that stuff, and you can run commands, you are going to type in DP, hit tab, there you go, DPS debug. Hit enter. It's going to say DPS debug is true. Okay, so what does that mean? That means every time I hit something, more than one time, you can see up there on the screen says DPS to others. And we got a massive number there because we're calculating our backstab damage there. We did not have the little exclamation over the dude's head yet. Also, I'm in Ghost. It's probably a good idea to be out of Ghost. And the command for that is just Ghost. So there you go. I'm out of Ghost now. So now this target can see us. This is the training dummy. To get a training dummy, you just type in spawn training dummy. Like that. Well, you can just type in train and hit tab and it should finish it for you, and type in dummy, training dummy. Anyway, do that, hit enter, and that gives you a training dummy. Now, you can never calculate your first hit even once you spawn one in because you need that exclamation point over their head, otherwise it's going to calculate backstab damage. If I hit him, you can see I did 281 damage there. So if I was to hit him again, that's calculating the backstab damage. You can't have that. That's not going to give you accurate DPS of the weapon. Now, an issue with Valheim is that we never hit for the same amount every time. And when you get into weapons like this with the silver knife, you can see we're actually doing different kinds of damage every time. So technically, since this dude does not burn for the spirit damage, we would not be getting accurate DPS on this weapon because we're not calculating in the damage over time we would get from spirit damage, which technically counts towards the weapon's DPS. So we're going to swap over here to the black metal knife instead. Now the black metal knife does two types of damage. It does slash and pierce. Once again, you can see those damage numbers range from 29 to 34. Another important thing that you need to do if you're going to calculate DPS is you need to make sure that your skill is maxed out. That way you are calculating the max range of what the weapon can do because, like I said, all weapons do a range of damage. For example, this one does 29 to 34 on both pierce and slash. If I set my knife skill to 20, as you see here, and we take a look at the damage on it now, you can see I'm not doing the max of what this weapon can do. So right now, if I was to run DPS check on it, I would be getting the DPS for it at skill level 20. So you could do that if you wanted to see about what DPS you would be doing at that specific skill level, but you would constantly have to reset it to make sure you are always at that skill level. And you can see it's changed a lot. Now we're doing 13 to 23. We're not even getting the max value that we could hit of 34. And you can easily set your skills or reset your skills with the two commands that you see there, reset skill, and then whatever it is that you want to reset. So for example, we did knives, and then raise skill, same thing. This time we did knives. So now that we're back to skill level 100, you can see we're back to 29 and 34. All right, so now that we got all that out of the way, let's talk more about this DPS tool, because you can't just strike a couple of times like we're just, okay, there we go. Is that the DPS of the weapon? No, that's not the DPS of the weapon. First off, the DPS tool does not count until you do your first attack. So you miss all of that wind-up time. Well, that's important because that needs to be calculated into the DPS. So when we do that first attack there, it's not counting until we do that hit. So if we hit twice, okay, we're missing all of that initial wind-up. It counts now, and then it counts when we do the second attack, and then it's figuring in that amount of time between those two attacks. But it isn't taking into account that first initial swing before we hit. So in order to correct that, you need to attack multiple times. Also, because of the fact that our damage ranges so much between 29 and 34, that's actually a pretty good amount. And if we take a look here, you can see 60, 62, 63, 64. We need to hit a lot of times to allow the tool to run the calculations, and eventually it gets to a point where it levels out. So if I just start attacking here, you can see that it's counting the attacks that we're doing, and it's giving us a constantly changing DPS. Now, once we hit about, 12, it's going to start to level out and bounce in between a set of numbers. So if we just keep attacking here, you'll see that it's going to be, well, we're out of stamina. So we stopped at 142.6 DPS is about what we're getting here. In my test, what I did is I made sure I was only attacking 12 times. So if we attack 12 times, that 158.3, that's our DPS. Now, you can attack more than 12 or 13, and you can set whatever attacks that you want. Just from my testing, I found that 12 is kind of like the threshold there. And that's going to give you pretty accurate DPS, but it's not going to be extremely accurate because, as you can see, every time we attack, it changes the number. So every time I do a set of 12 attacks and I record that DPS number that shows up there, so let's do 12 attacks. So right there, 158.4, that's the DPS that it's giving us. That's your average DPS for that run. Well, to get a more accurate picture of what the DPS is for the weapon, you have to record that number a bunch of times, then you average those DPS values together, and that's going to give you a more accurate representation of what the average DPS of the weapon is. Now, one of the things that I got accused of, and everyone, well, basically every one of the comments that accused me of being wrong and my tests being flawed, said that I was recording the damage per hit. The damage per hit is the white number that pops up. That would be your damage per hit. So right there. So if I was to record the damage per hit, I would record 64.6, 60.1, 57.8, 58.5, 61.1, you get the idea, 64.9, and then I would average those together, and that would give me the average damage per hit. But that's not what I did in my video for my testing. I attacked the dummy 12 times with each weapon, and then I recorded the number that you see up there, 158.0, which is the DPS I did for those 12 attacks. Now, once again, this works on most weapons. It will not work on weapons that do damage over time. And the easiest way for me to illustrate that is to grab some fire arrows and equip the bow. So if I attack this dummy here, you can see that it's ticking and ticking, and every time it ticks, it's recalculating that DPS. So it gives you an inaccurate representation of the kind of damage that a weapon can do. So we just need a simple undead thing here. I have a skeleton here, and if I strike this skeleton, you can see that it's calculating that damage over time as we're hitting it. And that's not an accurate representation of the DPS of this weapon. The same thing goes for when we strike these guys. We're not getting that damage over time, so we kind of can't see the actual DPS of the weapon because you need to factor in that damage over time. So for these type weapons, we need to actually know how quickly they attack. Once you know what the actual attack time is on them, then you can run a bunch of math and get an average damage per second for weapons that deal damage over time. And it does track time. If I stop for a second, you can see it drops down really low. If I wait, look how much lower it got. We're going to wait till it almost disappears. Strike again, it gets even lower. But if I start attacking faster and faster and faster and faster, you'll see that that number will start to rise over time. But I'm going to run out of stamina before we get up to where it needs to be to show my actual DPS. Okay, so hopefully that was a better explanation of how I'm running tests on weapons and how you can see the actual DPS of a weapon. If you want to run these numbers for yourself, or if you were confused about what I was doing, hopefully this better explains it, so now you understand what I was doing. I wasn't wrong in my calculations. They were as accurate as they can be, and I wasn't recording the damage per hit. I'm gonna, at some point, I actually care about the damage per hit, but that's not the tests that I was doing in my previous video, which I'll link down below if you haven't seen it. I'm gonna wrap it up there. I've rambled on long enough. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Hopefully you found it helpful. I want to give an absolutely massive shout out and thank you to my supporters on Patreon for making this episode possible. Y'all are absolutely amazing people. If you would like to join my League Crew Patreon supporters, please check out the link in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment down below. Let me know what you thought. If you're shy, you don't like to comment, just hit that thumbs up button and show your support. Until next time, thanks for watching.